For years, a wealthy but emotionally distant billionaire watched his autistic son sit quietly by the same window, pointing at a garden and repeating strange words no one could decipher. Doctors called it another symptom. Nannies ignored it. He assumed it meant nothing. But then a new housekeeper arrived, someone different. She noticed what everyone else overlooked. She paid attention. What she found outside that window would reveal a heartbreaking truth, a missing piece of the past, and a secret that would forever change the family. Elliot was a boy who spent most of his time in silence, sitting by a large window in his family's mansion in a posh neighborhood of San Francisco. Every day, he stared outside, pointing at the garden and repeating the same phrase relentlessly. "Mommy's there again." Beyond that, he barely spoke. When he did, no one truly understood him. Elliot was autistic, and people often assumed his words held no real meaning. He had no friends, didn't play or chat with other kids, just sat by the window, repeating his odd phrase and pointing as if something vital was out there. His father, Nathan, paid it no mind. Nathan chalked up Elliot's behavior to his condition. He didn't ask questions or try to understand. To him, his son was just a quiet boy with special needs, living in his own world. Nathan was a very rich man, the owner of a major company in San Francisco, with more than enough money to provide everything Elliot needed. But Nathan wasn't warm or affectionate. He'd lost his wife when Elliot was born and had never been the same since. Her death left him distant, unable to connect with his son or listen to him. Even when Elliot repeated the same phrase daily, Nathan walked by without pause. He didn't ask what Elliot meant or why he pointed outside. Nathan had built a life around avoiding emotions. To him, feelings were a problem he had no time for. He kept busy with business meetings, calls, and emails, always finding reasons to ignore what happened at home. He told himself Elliot was safe, fed, and cared for. That was enough. The household staff followed the same pattern. There were maids, cooks, and drivers, but none truly saw Elliot. They did their jobs, cleaned, cooked, drove, answered calls, but didn't ask questions. They were used to seeing the boy at the window, hearing his strange words. It became background noise, part of the routine. No one stopped to wonder why he always pointed to the same spot or seemed so focused. Some thought it was just how autistic kids were. Others feared asking questions might stir trouble. So, day after day, Elliot sat alone, trying to show something with his small hands and soft voice, but no one took a moment to truly see him. Even though Elliot didn't speak clearly, he was trying hard to say something. His words weren't random. He kept saying the same thing for a reason. "Mommy's there again." Whenever he said it, he pointed to the same spot in the garden. His eyes looked serious, full of meaning, but he couldn't explain better. He was only 8 years old, and autism made expressing his feelings harder. Still, in his mind, he knew what he was trying to say. Something out there reminded him of his mother, maybe a shape, a movement, or a person. Maybe he'd seen something odd, but no one asked. He repeated his message day after day, hoping someone would finally hear and help him explain. Then, one day, someone new entered the house. A new housekeeper was hired to help with cleaning and organizing. She wasn't like the others. She didn't rush through her work or fear stopping to look around. On her first day, she noticed Elliot at the window, saw how he pointed to the garden, and heard the words he repeated. At first, she didn't understand either, but something made her pause and watch. She saw the sadness on his face and the way he tried to communicate. Though no one had listened before, she didn't walk by like the rest. She stopped, looked where he pointed, and in that small moment, everything began to change. The new housekeeper, Sarah, started paying closer attention to Elliot. She asked gentle questions and sat by him quietly, not forcing him to talk, just being present. She noticed details others missed, like how his fingers always pointed to the same tree, how his voice shifted slightly when he spoke, or how his body moved with a sense of urgency. For the first time in years, someone saw him not as a problem but as a child. She didn't treat him as broken or invisible. She treated him as someone with something to say. The more time she spent near him, the more she understood. Elliot wasn't just repeating a memory. He was trying to show something happening now, something real, something no one else had seen. And so the story begins with a young boy at a large window. A boy who pointed every day and spoke words that seemed strange to everyone but him. A boy who lived in silence, surrounded by people who never truly looked at him. But now, someone had noticed, someone had listened, and for the first time, there was a small hope that Elliot's words would be heard and his message finally understood. The mystery of the garden, the meaning behind Mommy's There Again, and the truth of what Elliot saw still waited to be uncovered. But something significant had already happened. The invisible child was no longer invisible. Sarah was a young woman from humble roots. She lived in a modest home outside San Francisco and worked hard to support her mother and younger siblings. When she landed the job at Nathan's mansion as a housekeeper, she felt grateful but nervous. It was the grandest house she'd ever stepped into. On her first day, she arrived early, dressed in simple but neat clothes, and was shown around by the head housekeeper. She quickly noticed the house was eerily quiet. The staff worked in silence, speaking only when necessary. As she walked down a hallway, Sarah saw a small boy sitting by a window. He barely moved, just stared outside. Then he pointed to the garden and whispered, "Mommy's there again." The other staff ignored him, but Sarah stopped. She felt something odd in that moment, a sense that this boy wasn't just quiet, he was deeply sad. In the days that followed, Sarah kept seeing the boy in the same spot, doing the same thing. She asked an older maid who he was. "That's Elliot," the maid said. "The boss's son. Don't mind him. He's special." Sarah didn't like the coldness of that reply. She kept watching Elliot from a distance. He didn't talk much, but she could feel he was trying to say something. Most people passed him without a glance. Sarah didn't. She started greeting him every morning with a smile and a quiet hello. At first, Elliot didn't respond, but Sarah was patient. She never pushed him to speak, just made sure he knew someone noticed him. Slowly, his eyes began to follow her. When she cleaned the hallway, he watched. When she carried laundry, he peeked around corners. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Over weeks, Elliot began trailing Sarah around the house. He didn't say anything at first, just followed quietly like a shadow. Sarah didn't mind. She let him stay close, talking softly about what she was doing. Folding towels, making beds, preparing lunch. One day, while cleaning a table, she glanced over and saw something that stunned her. Elliot was smiling. It was a small, shy smile, but real. Sarah smiled back. That night, when she brought him a piece of fruit, he took it and said something that made her freeze. "Mommy." At first, Sarah thought she'd misheard, but then he repeated it. "Mommy." She didn't know what to say. Her heart tightened, but it also felt full. She knelt beside him, gently touching his hand. "I'm Sarah," she said softly. Elliot just looked at her and smiled again. Sarah wasn't sure why Elliot called her Mommy, but she wasn't offended. Instead, she felt touched. She sensed he didn't say the word lightly. Maybe he remembered his real mother and saw something similar in her, or maybe he just felt safe. Either way, Sarah didn't correct him. She let him call her that. Whenever he said Mommy, she just smiled and responded with warmth. Nathan, however, brushed it off. When Sarah mentioned it to him one day, he shrugged and said, "He gets confused. It's just his way." Sarah disagreed but didn't argue. She began to feel there was something deeper going on. Elliot was trying to connect, and Sarah was the only one willing to listen. He wasn't just repeating things for no reason. There was meaning in his actions. Sarah knew she had to pay attention. Every time Elliot pointed to the garden and said, "Mommy's there again," she grew more curious. At first, she thought it might just be a memory, something he couldn't let go of. But the way he repeated it daily, always at the same time, with the same finger pointing to the same exact spot, started to feel like a clue. Sarah began observing him closely. She noticed his body tense before he spoke, and his eyes fixed on something outside. But whenever she looked, there was nothing. Just a normal part of the garden, a tree, some grass, and flowers. Still, the habit didn't stop. Elliot kept doing it, and Sarah couldn't ignore it anymore. She felt he was trying to show something important, something overlooked for too long. She made a quiet decision. She needed to find out what was out there. One afternoon, when the house was quiet and the other staff were busy, Sarah stood by Elliot at the window. He was there as always, pointing and whispering, "Mommy's there again." Sarah knelt beside him and looked where he pointed. She took a deep breath. "Let's go see Elliot," she said gently. She held out her hand. Elliot hesitated, then slowly took it. They walked together down the hallway, past the kitchen, and out the back door toward the garden. Sarah followed his pace, watching where his eyes went. They passed the flowers and the tree until they reached a corner of the garden that seemed untouched. Sarah looked around. Something was hidden behind a bush, something small and odd. She turned to Elliot. His face was serious now. This was it. Sarah finally understood. What Elliot was pointing to was real. It was late afternoon. The sun still shone, but the light was softer. Sarah stood by Elliot at the large window, as she had so many times. He was pointing again, silently, with the same words on his lips. "Mommy's there again." This time, Sarah didn't just look outside. She leaned down gently, took Elliot's hand, and said, "Let's go see what's out there." Elliot looked at her, didn't speak, but followed her lead. Sarah opened the back door and guided him to the garden. They walked carefully, step by step, along the path. The grass was tall, a bit overgrown. It seemed no one used this part of the garden anymore. Elliot held her hand tightly, not looking around, his gaze fixed ahead. It was as if he knew exactly where they were going. Sarah followed in silence, staying close. They reached a corner of the garden hidden behind tall plants and old trees. The branches were dry, and some leaves scratched their legs as they passed. It looked like no one had cleaned or tended this part of the yard in years. Sarah pushed aside some thick bushes, and there it was, an old swing hanging from a crooked wooden frame. The seat was rusty, one rope slightly frayed, but it still stood. Elliot didn't wait. He walked straight to the swing, sat down, and began to swing slowly. His legs moved back and forth, and his eyes closed. Then he whispered something softly, "Mommy's there again." Sarah stood frozen. A strange chill ran through her. This place, this swing, wasn't just an old toy. It meant something to Elliot. This was what he'd been pointing to all along. As she watched, Sarah realized the significance of this spot. It wasn't just a corner of the garden. It was a memory, a piece of Elliot's past still alive here. He wasn't pointing to the swing for fun. He pointed because it reminded him of something or someone. Sarah sat slowly on the ground near the swing, not speaking, just letting Elliot feel what he needed. He kept swinging, eyes closed, whispering the same words now and then. Sarah began to understand that Elliot wasn't repeating empty phrases. He was trying to return to a time when he felt loved and safe. That swing was his way back to his mother. Maybe he used to sit there with her. Maybe she pushed him while he swung. Whatever it was, it mattered deeply to him. And finally, someone was there to see it and stay with him. That day changed something in Sarah. After that, she promised herself she'd take Elliot to the swing every day, not because he asked, but because she understood. It wasn't just a walk. It was healing. It was memory. So, the next afternoon, she took his hand again, and they went to the swing as before. Elliot didn't talk much, but she could see the difference in his body. He was calmer. His shoulders weren't as tense. He smiled more now, even if just a little. He kept saying, "Mommy." Sarah didn't correct him anymore. She didn't need to. She knew he wasn't confused. He was remembering, and that memory helped him feel close to the one he'd lost. Every time he sat on the swing, it was like returning to a place where everything made sense to him. The other staff still didn't get it. Some whispered things like, "Why does she waste time in that old garden? That boy will always be that way." But Sarah didn't care. She didn't explain herself or try to change their minds. Her focus was on Elliot. The more time she spent with him, the more he opened up in his own way. He started humming little tunes. He began holding her hand without fear. Once, he even pointed to a flower and said, "Pretty," which made Sarah smile for the rest of the day. The garden became their quiet place, a space where no one else went and no one judged, just Sarah and Elliot. One day, she brought a small blanket and sat with him for an hour while he swung back and forth. It wasn't loud or exciting, but it felt real, peaceful, and important. Day after day, they kept returning. It didn't matter if the day was sunny or cloudy. Sarah and Elliot made that small walk to the back of the garden. The swing stayed the same, old, a bit broken, but still sturdy. Elliot would sit on it, swing slowly, and close his eyes. He never asked for anything more. That place, that moment, gave him something no one else could: connection. Sarah never missed a day. She started keeping the area clean, trimming some plants, clearing dry leaves, not to change it, but to protect it. She respected what it meant to Elliot. Now, she knew the boy at the window had never been lost in daydreams. He'd always been trying to show them this place, full of silence but brimming with meaning. A place where he once felt loved, a place where he could still whisper, "Mommy's there again," and feel close to her. It was another quiet afternoon when Sarah took Elliot to the garden. As always, they walked hand in hand to the old swing at the back of the yard. Elliot was calm, seeming happy. He didn't talk much, but Sarah had learned to read his expressions. When they reached the swing, Elliot let go of her hand and went to his usual spot. Sarah spread the small blanket on the ground and sat down. Everything seemed normal until something caught her eye. On a large rock, a few feet away, stood a little girl. She was very thin, her clothes dirty and torn. Her hair was messy, her face smudged with dirt, but her eyes were bright and alert, watching them without fear. She didn't say a word. Sarah stood quickly, unsure what to do. The girl didn't move, just kept watching in silence. Sarah stayed still for a moment, trying to decide whether to call out or back away. But Elliot surprised her. Instead of getting nervous or shy, he turned and looked at the girl. A smile slowly spread across his face. Without a word, he walked toward her. Sarah's heart raced. Elliot never reacted this way to strangers. He usually was behind her or looked away, but now he seemed completely at ease, even happy. The girl stepped down from the rock and walked to Elliot. The two children stood face to face, and then, as if they'd known each other forever, they walked to the swing together and started to play. First, Elliot sat while the girl pushed him. Then they switched places. They didn't speak, but their body language was full of energy and joy. Sarah could hardly believe what she saw. The connection between them was instant, deep, and completely natural. As she watched them play, something began to bother her. It wasn't just their quick bond, which seemed unusual. It was how much they looked alike. The girl had the same hair color as Elliot. Their eyes had the same shape and shade of brown. Even their facial expressions and small gestures, like the way they tilted their heads or moved their hands, seemed eerily familiar. Sarah leaned closer, studying them carefully. They looked about the same age, maybe 8 or 9. When the girl laughed, Elliot laughed too. When she ran in circles, he copied her. Sarah felt a chill. It was almost like looking at twins, but that couldn't be. Elliot didn't have siblings. At least, that's what everyone believed. Sarah had never heard of other children in Nathan's family. Still, she couldn't ignore what she was seeing. Something deeper was happening, something she didn't yet understand. Sarah stood and walked slowly toward the children. She didn't want to scare the girl, so she spoke softly. "Hi, are you hungry? Want something to eat?" The girl looked at her for a second, then nodded. Sarah opened a small bag she brought and pulled out a sandwich and a water bottle. She handed them to the girl, who took the food quickly and ate in big bites, like someone who hadn't eaten in a long time. Sarah knelt beside her and tried talking again. "What's your name? Where do you live?" The girl paused for a moment but didn't answer. She kept chewing, eyes down. Then, as quietly as she'd appeared, she stood, gave Elliot one last look, and smiled. Before Sarah could ask anything else, the girl turned and ran into the trees. In seconds, she was gone. The trees were dense in that part of the garden, and Sarah couldn't see where she'd gone. She turned back to Elliot, who was now sitting on the swing again, looking calm. Sarah sat beside him, her mind racing with questions. Who was that girl? Where did she come from? Why did Elliot react to her with such warmth when he usually avoided new people? And above all, why did they look so much alike? Sarah couldn't shake the strange feeling in her chest. This wasn't normal. It wasn't just a random visit from a poor child wandering through the trees. There was something about the way the girl appeared, connected with Elliot without a word, and then vanished. It all felt too perfect, too strange. Sarah knew this wasn't an ordinary moment. It meant something. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the girl. There was no way she'd imagined it. Elliot had seen her too, played with her, laughed with her. Sarah decided she needed to be ready if the girl returned. She started carrying extra food and clothes in her bag, just in case. She even brought a flashlight and checked the garden path more carefully each day, but deep down, she felt the girl hadn't appeared by chance. There was something more going on, something tied to Elliot. Maybe the girl held answers about his past. Maybe she was part of the story no one had told. All Sarah knew was she had to find out more. The garden was no longer just a quiet place with an old swing. Now it was a center of something mysterious. And it had all started with a little girl standing on a rock. Back at the house, Sarah couldn't keep what she'd seen to herself. She sat in the kitchen, still thinking about the girl who'd appeared in the garden. After a few minutes, she got up and went straight to Nathan's office. He was working as usual, behind his large desk, staring at a screen full of numbers and documents. Sarah knocked lightly. "I need to talk to you," she said. Nathan didn't look up. "About what?" he replied, still typing. "About Elliot and something that happened today." Nathan sighed, but finally gave her his attention. Sarah explained everything. How the girl appeared in the garden, how dirty and thin she was, how she didn't speak, and how she vanished. Nathan showed no reaction until Sarah described the girl's face. "She looks just like Elliot," Sarah said. "Same eyes, same hair, even the way she moves." That's when Nathan froze completely. For a moment, he didn't speak. He stared past Sarah, as if he wasn't really there. Something in her words had hit him deeply. He stood and walked slowly to the window. "That's impossible," he murmured. Sarah waited in silence. Nathan was usually unemotional, but now his face looked pale and strange. "There was a problem when Elliot was born," he said slowly. "My wife died during childbirth. They said there were complications. I didn't even get to hold her hand." He paused, remembering something he hadn't thought about in years. The doctor said there was confusion. For a few minutes, no one knew what was happening. Then they told me she was gone, and only one baby had survived. Nathan turned and looked at Sarah. "But I remember, for a moment, I felt something wasn't right. I've always had this doubt." Sarah had never heard Nathan talk like this. He was usually cold, focused only on work and routine, but now something deep had opened inside him. "You never checked?" Sarah asked. "Never asked for proof?" Nathan shook his head. "I trusted the hospital. I was broken. I just lost a woman I loved. I had a newborn to care for. I didn't question anything." He stopped, thinking. Sarah could see he was trying to stay calm, but his hands were shaking. "Now you're telling me there's a girl who looks like Elliot, who shows up out of nowhere, doesn't speak, and disappears again." Nathan ran a hand through his hair. "I don't know what's going on, but I need answers. I can't ignore this." He went back to his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out an old folder. It was dusty and worn, filled with old papers, hospital records, birth reports, and death certificates. Nathan hadn't opened it in years. He sat down and started flipping through the pages while Sarah stood nearby, watching. His eyes scanned the words quickly. The document confirmed what he already knew. One live birth, mother deceased. But something about how the documents were written now seemed off. There were smudges, corrections, even two different doctor signatures on one form. Nathan frowned. Why are there two doctors here? Why were there delays in the records? He looked at Sarah. "I need to go back to that hospital." Sarah nodded. "Want me to come with you?" she asked. "No," he said. "I'll go alone." Nathan closed the folder and put it in a bag. "If someone lied to me, if something happened to my child, I need to know the truth." That night, he booked a flight. While Nathan began digging into the past, Sarah stayed by Elliot's side, as always. She kept up their daily visits to the swing in the garden. Each day, the girl returned, never speaking, never staying long, but always appearing. She played with Elliot as if they'd known each other forever. She smiled when he smiled. Sometimes she touched his hand or sat beside him without a word. Sarah started noticing patterns. The girl only came in the late afternoons, never took more food, and never answered questions, but her presence was constant. Sarah began carrying a notebook, jotting down everything. The time she appeared, how long she stayed, what she did. Sarah felt she was now part of something much bigger. It wasn't just about helping Elliot. It was about understanding who this girl was and why Elliot was so deeply connected to her without needing to speak. Nathan called from the airport before boarding. "I'll let you know what I find," he told Sarah. "Keep an eye on things. Write everything down." Sarah agreed. After he hung up, she looked out at the swing through the window. Elliot was there again, and the girl had just arrived. They sat close, their heads almost touching. Sarah felt a weight in her chest. This was more than coincidence. She was sure of it now. Elliot had never connected with anyone like he did with this mysterious girl. And she, whoever she was, had come for a reason. Sarah couldn't explain how she knew, but she did. And if Nathan's suspicions were right, something terrible had happened years ago. Maybe someone had taken a child. Maybe they were twins separated at birth. Sarah watched them through the glass, still taking notes in her notebook. She knew the truth was coming. Sarah had been watching the bond between Elliot and the girl grow stronger each day. It was something special, something she'd never seen before. The two didn't need words to understand each other. They communicated with looks, hand gestures, and simple movements. When one stood, the other followed. When one laughed, the other did too. Often, they sat silently side by side on the swing or played simple games, like touching leaves or tossing pebbles into a pile. Sarah was amazed at how connected they were. She'd worked with other kids before, and none had shown this kind of silent understanding. What surprised her most was how calm Elliot had become. He used to avoid people, but now, near the girl, he was open and relaxed. It was as if they were part of the same story. One afternoon, Sarah saw something that brought tears to her eyes. Elliot was playing with the girl at the edge of the garden when he suddenly looked at her and said, "Sis?" It was a soft but clear word. The girl stopped, looked at him, and smiled. Then she laughed, a laugh that showed she knew exactly what he meant. She didn't correct him. She accepted it. Sarah stood frozen for a moment. Sis meant sister. Elliot had never called anyone that. It wasn't something he picked up from others. It was something he chose himself. From that moment, he kept calling her that. "Sis, come. Sis, swing." The girl always responded with a smile or by taking his hand. Sarah's heart tightened each time she heard it. She began to wonder if it wasn't just a sweet nickname, but something more real, deeper than anyone could imagine. Sarah wanted to help the girl more. She tried bringing her into the house a few times, offering food, a bath, even a place to sleep. But each time, the girl stopped at the door and shook her head, refusing to cross the threshold. Sarah asked gently, "Are you scared?" The girl didn't answer, but her body language made it clear she didn't trust adults. She only stayed close to Elliot and, to some extent, Sarah. She slept outside, near the trees or behind the garden wall. Sarah often left food and blankets on the back steps. By morning, the items were gone, showing the girl took them but never came inside. Still, she let Sarah brush her hair and clean her hands. Sarah felt honored by that trust. It wasn't much, but it meant the girl was slowly opening up. Sarah stayed patient, never pushing, just offering care. One day, Sarah had an idea. She didn't want to scare the girl, but needed to show someone what she saw daily. So, she waited until the girl and Elliot were playing and quietly took some photos with her phone. The images were clear. 2 kids laughing, running, and sitting together on the swing. When Sarah looked at the photos, she was shocked again. The resemblance between them was undeniable. Side by side, they looked like a boy and girl version of the same child. The eyes, the faces, even the smiles, it was impossible to ignore. That night, when Nathan returned home, Sarah waited until Elliot was asleep. Then she showed him the photos. He stared at them for a long time, saying nothing at first. Then he sat down slowly, took a deep breath, and whispered, It's like looking at Elliot as a girl. It was a final push he needed. He'd had doubts before, but now he couldn't deny something strange and possibly very wrong had happened in the past. He made a decision. The next morning, he made several calls. He hired a private investigator, someone experienced with hospital records and family cases. Nathan wanted everything. Hospital records from the day Elliot was born, staff lists, birth certificates, and any reports of missing or unidentified children from that time. He wanted real answers, not guesses. Sarah helped, writing down everything she'd noticed about the girl, her habits, behavior, appearance, and how she interacted with Elliot. While the investigator began the search for the truth, Sarah kept caring for children. Every afternoon, she brought food, water, and extra clothes. The garden became not just a place to play, but a place of waiting for something bigger to be revealed. Over the days, something beautiful happened. Despite all the mystery, Sarah, Elliot, and the girl created a small, peaceful routine. Each day felt like a gift. Elliot and the girl played with rocks, flowers, and sticks, inventing games that made them laugh. Sarah sometimes joined in, drawing the dirt or helping stack small piles of leaves. She watched their connection grow stronger and deeper. Sometimes, Elliot rested his head on the girl's shoulder, and she quietly placed her hand over his. Other times, they ran in circles, laughing until they fell to ground. It was as if they were healing each other through simple joy. Sarah took more photos, not to investigate, but to remember. Even without answers, something important was happening. Something pure. It wasn't about the past anymore. It was about the present. A moment of innocence, trust, and silent love between two children. The private investigation moved quickly. Nathan had asked the investigator to check every detail of Elliot's birth. Within days, troubling information surfaced. The hospital where Elliot was born had disorganized records from the day of the birth. Staff names were missing and signatures didn't match. But one thing stood out. A nurse on duty that night quit suddenly just 2 days after the birth. There was no forwarding address, no resignation letter. He just vanished. The investigator couldn't track him down. This detail shook Nathan deeply. He sat alone in his office, staring at the paper in front of him. His hands trembled. The more he looked at the gaps, the more he realized something very wrong had happened that night. Nathan didn't want guesses anymore. He needed proof, a real answer. That same night, Nathan called Sarah to his office. He looked tired, but his voice was firm. "I want to do a DNA test," he said. "We need to be sure." Sarah agreed. She knew it was time, but she also knew it wouldn't be easy. The girl still didn't fully trust anyone except Elliot and, to some degree, Sarah. Taking her into the city would be tough. The next day, Sarah spent time sitting with the girl, talking softly. She explained everything in simple words, that they just wanted to check something, that there'd be no needles or pain, and they'd all go together. At first, the girl didn't react, but when Elliot took her hand and said, "Come, sis," she finally nodded. Sarah gave her a clean dress and brushed her hair. Then they got in the car. Nathan drove in silence the whole way. No one spoke much. The clinic was small and quiet. Nathan had arranged everything privately, asking the doctor to conduct the DNA test discreetly. They entered through a back door to avoid attention. The girl looked around, nervous, but Sarah stayed by her side, holding her hand. Elliot sat beside them, calm as ever. The test was quick. A nurse gently swabbed the inside of the girl's cheek and did the same for Nathan and Elliot. It was over in minutes. Sarah thanked the staff and helped the girl back to the car. Nathan ensured the samples were sent to a trusted lab. He made it clear he wanted fast, accurate results. Back at the house, everyone was quiet. No one knew what to say. The wait began. It would take days for the results. Each carried their own thoughts, but no one spoke them aloud. During those waiting days, something unexpected started happening in the house. Nathan began to change. For the first time in years, he didn't spend every hour locked in his office or buried in business reports. Instead, he spent more time watching the children. One afternoon, he stood at the window and saw Elliot and the girl running barefoot through the grass. They laughed, fell, and got up again. Nathan smiled, a real smile. Sarah saw from the kitchen and felt a deep warmth in her chest. Little by little, Nathan started talking more with Elliot. He asked questions, tried playing simple games. Even if a bit awkward, he was clearly trying. Elliot responded in small ways, a glance, a nod, a soft word. Sarah stayed nearby during these moments, not taking over, just being present, gently guiding things along without forcing anything. She'd become the bridge between them all. Sarah kept care of the girl every day, making sure she ate, stayed clean, and felt safe. Though the girl still didn't sleep inside, she began staying longer into the evenings. She sat on the back steps or lay on a blanket under the stars while Elliot held her hand. Sarah never pushed her, just made sure she felt welcome. Nathan started calling her Little One, and once even asked if she wanted juice. The girl didn't answer, but didn't run away either. The atmosphere in the house was different now, lighter, less cold. It was no longer a place of silence and routines. It was starting to feel like a real home, even if slowly. They were all still waiting for the test results, but something inside each of them was already shifting. The possibility of the truth was bringing them closer. Finally, after 6 long days, the results arrived. The envelope came in the morning. Nathan took it from the delivery person himself, closed the front door, and walked to the living room. Sarah was already there with the children, helping them color on the floor. Nathan stood still, gripping the envelope tightly. He opened it slowly. His eyes scanned the paper. He didn't say anything. Sarah stood and stepped closer. "Nathan?" He turned to her, his face pale. "She's mine," he said. "She's Elliot's twin." The room went silent. Nathan sank onto the couch, still staring at the paper. The little girl looked up from the floor, not fully understanding. Elliot crawled to her and hugged her tightly. "Sis," he said again. Sarah sat beside them, her eyes welling up. The truth had finally come. The girl who appeared from nowhere wasn't a stranger. She was a missing piece of their family. A part of their story returned. Nathan sat in his office, holding the DNA results for the 10th time that morning. The truth was clear now. The girl was his daughter. There was no doubt left. But instead of bringing peace, it unleashed a storm inside him. He felt guilt for not questioning sooner. He felt anger at those who had lied. And above all, a deep sadness for all the years he lost with her, for all the nights she likely spent alone, cold, hungry, or scared. His chest ached imagining her as a baby, taken away, nameless and voiceless. He looked at old photos of his wife, remembering her smile and the name she'd chosen years ago if they had a daughter, Amelia. That name wouldn't leave his mind. He wasn't just hurt, he was ready to act. Nathan picked up the phone and called the hospital directly. He didn't ask politely. He demanded to speak to the director. His voice was firm, his words cutting through any excuses. "I have proof," he said. "I want answers." The case quickly escalated. News of missing hospital records and a nurse who vanished caused tension among the staff. Then something unexpected happened. An older nurse, no longer working at the hospital but still in touch with some colleagues, came forward. She confessed that years ago, she'd handed a newborn baby to a woman she knew, claiming the child had died. It was part of a hidden baby trafficking ring. She said she regretted it and had stayed silent out of fear. According to her, the woman who took Amelia never returned to the hospital. Somehow, the girl ended up lost or escaped. Nathan couldn't believe what he heard. The story spread quickly, and the hospital faced a scandal. Investigations were launched. Reporters camped outside the building. Nathan stayed away from the media. He wasn't interested in headlines. He wanted justice. More than that, he wanted his daughter safe, never to feel abandoned again. With his lawyer's help, he began the legal process to adopt her back. Though she was already his biological daughter, she had no documents. To the government, she was a child without an identity. Nathan refused to wait. He moved quickly, signing every paper, attending every meeting. When it came time to choose a name, he didn't hesitate. He named her Amelia, just as his wife had wanted. When he told Sarah and the children, Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Elliot clapped and hugged Amelia. She didn't speak but smiled, a smile full of trust. That name became entirely hers. After Amelia was officially registered, something shifted in the house. It wasn't just about papers. It was about connection. Amelia and Elliot, now known as twins, grew even closer. They ate together, played together, even fell asleep holding hands on the couch. Elliot, who used to be silent most of the day, started saying more words. He wasn't afraid anymore. Amelia, who had spent much of her short life hiding and surviving, now had her own room, clean clothes, and a safe place to sleep every night. Nathan watched them closely. He began to enjoy simple things, making snacks, telling bedtime stories, or helping Elliot draw. He even started to laugh. Really laugh. The house, once like a cold, clean, silent museum, was alive again. Toys were scattered everywhere. Laughter echoed through the halls, and the silence was no longer heavy. It was filled with joy. Sarah remained at the center of it all, but never in the spotlight. She didn't ask for recognition or praise. She kept cooking, cleaning, and helping with the kids as before, but everyone saw her differently now. Amelia sat by her side whenever she could. Elliot always reached for her hand first when something bothered him. Nathan, once cold and distant, now looked at her with more than gratitude. He admired her. She brought change to the house without forcing anything. She paid attention when no one else did. She listened, cared, and acted. Nathan found himself watching her during dinner, wondering about her life before all this. He started asking questions, not about tasks, but about her thoughts and dreams. Sarah answered simply, expecting nothing more. But it was clear to both that something was growing between them, something honest and new. One evening, Nathan was in the garden, watching the twins play near the swing. Amelia pushed Elliot gently while he laughed. Sarah was nearby, folding some clothes. The sun dipped behind the trees, and for the first time in a long time, Nathan felt peace. He took a deep breath and looked at Sarah. "Thank you," he said quietly. Sarah smiled, not knowing what to say. Everything had changed. The truth had been painful, but it had opened a path to healing. Nathan had found the daughter he never knew he'd lost. Elliot had found his sister. Amelia had found safety. And it all began because one woman noticed a quiet boy at a window. Nathan didn't know what the future held, but he wasn't afraid to hope anymore. He wasn't numb anymore. For the first time in years, he was living again. The family was slowly rebuilding the pieces. Elliot, once quiet and hidden in his own world, now spoke in short sentences. He smiled more often. He even laughed loudly while playing with Amelia, something that had never happened before. He still had quiet moments, but now there was light in his eyes. Amelia was no longer the scared girl hiding behind trees, refusing to come inside. She had her own room, toys, and a safe bed. She followed Elliot everywhere and hugged him often. The two were inseparable, playing, drawing on the walls with crayons. Sometimes they just sat side by side, saying nothing, but even in silence, they were connected. They didn't need to explain anything. It was clear to everyone they were more than siblings. They were two halves of the same story. Nathan had changed too. The man who once lived locked in his office, focused only on work and closed emotions, was gone. He still had days when sadness returned, but now he faced it with open eyes. He spent more time with the twins, reading to them or sitting on the floor while they played. He learned to help Elliot calm down during stressful moments and to make Amelia feel safe without pushing her. His love was now real, not just duty but presence. Inspired by all that had happened, Nathan decided to create something meaningful. He founded a nonprofit in memory of his late wife. Its goal was to support children with autism and homeless children, like Amelia once was. He wanted to ensure other kids like his weren't forgotten or left behind. It was his way of turning pain into something useful. When the foundation opened, Nathan invited Sarah to join. He offered her a formal role with a title and an office, but Sarah gently declined. She didn't want a title. She wasn't interested in bureaucracy or meetings. "My place," she said, "is with the kids. Not just Elliot and Amelia, but others too." Nathan understood. Sarah hadn't done any of this for money or status. She did it because she cared. So Instead of pushing her into a role, he simply asked her to stay because she was already part of the family. Sarah agreed. She kept helping with daily routines, play with the kids, and keeping the house in order. But everyone knew she was more than a helper. She was the one who saw what no one else did. She changed their lives. Elliot called her Sarah, but the way he said it meant so much more than just a name. Nathan and Sarah grew closer, but nothing was rushed. They talked more often, sometimes late into the night. Nathan listened to her stories about her past, and Sarah listened when he needed to talk about his wife. There was no pressure, no awkwardness. It was natural. He began to notice small things. How she smiled when Amelia danced. How she responded quickly when Elliot needed comfort. How she remembered every little detail that mattered. Sarah saw his efforts too. How Nathan tried to be better each day. How he no longer hid his feelings and was learning to be present. Their relationship grew from respect, not plans. People outside the house often asked who Sarah was. Nathan simply said, "She's with us." And that was enough. The kids trusted her. He did too. Even if neither spoke of love openly, it was clear something strong and solid had grown between them. One of the biggest changes happened in the garden. The old swing, once rusty and forgotten, was now fixed and clean. Nathan had it repaired after the DNA results came back, as a way to mark the start of a new life. He painted a frame himself and added 2 strong ropes so both kids could swing together. Every afternoon, Elliot and Amelia ran to the swing after lunch. It became their favorite place. Sometimes they laughed and played loudly. Other times, they just sat silently, swinging side by side. The swing was where Sarah first saw Elliot trying to tell the world something important. Now it was a place of joy, memory, and healing. Whenever Sarah looked at it, she felt gratitude. That swing had started it all. It brought the past into the present, showed the way to truth and love. The garden became the heart of the house. It wasn't just grass and trees anymore. It was a place full of meaning. The swing stood as a symbol not just of the twins' bond, but of everything the family had been through. The pain, the mystery, the discovery, and the healing. Elliot and Amelia played there every day, and Sarah often watched from the kitchen window. Nathan sometimes joined them, sitting on the steps with a coffee, smiling as he watched his kids laugh. Life wasn't perfect, and there were still tough days, but the difference now was they faced those days together. What was once a house full of silence had become a home full of love and new memories. They weren't the same people anymore, and that was okay. 2 hearts, Elliot's and Amelia's, rewrote their story with Sarah and Nathan walking beside them. Years passed. The garden was no longer wild and overgrown. The grass was trimmed, the flowers vibrant, and the trees taller, offering more shade. But one thing hadn't changed, the swing. It still stood where it all began, now painted white with flowers growing at its base. Elliot and Amelia, no longer little kids, were now teenagers. They were taller, stronger, and more confident. But every now and then, they returned to the swing like they used to. On one special day, they were laughing and pushing each other on it, taking turns. They talked about school, life, and even joked about who could still swing higher. From a distance, it looked like a normal day. But for this family, that place was never just a garden. It was where it all started. It held the first signs of change. The family had become something special. What began with pain and confusion had slowly turned into something full of love and purpose. Nathan wrote a book about their story. It told the truth, not just about the hospital scandal, but about grief, healing, and reunion. The book gained attention, and soon Nathan was invited to speak at schools and conferences. Sarah sometimes went with him, always quiet but strong. She sat beside him, listening as he spoke about how listening, just listening, had changed everything. Elliot and Amelia joined sometimes too. They weren't just symbols of the story. They were living proof that love and attention could rebuild what was once broken. People in the audience often cried. Many stayed after to thank them, share their own stories, or say they felt inspired. The story that once belonged only to them now belonged to many others too. Elliot, now a teenager, became someone no one expected. He wasn't just more talkative. He was confident. He spoke clearly in public, especially when sharing his own story. He stood before classrooms and told other kids about the days when he barely spoke, about how he used to sit at the window and point. He explained how it felt to be invisible, how it hurt when people ignored him, but then he'd smile and share what changed. "Someone listened to me," he said once in a school auditorium. It was Sarah. She didn't walk by like everyone else. She stopped. She looked. She asked why I was pointing, and that changed everything. The kids listened closely, and teachers wiped away tears. Elliot's voice was calm, not dramatic. He didn't try to make anyone cry. He just told the truth, and somehow that was more powerful than anything else. Amelia found her voice too. She didn't like public speaking like Elliot, but she became active in helping other kids, especially those who'd lived on the streets, like she once had. She worked with a foundation Nathan created, spending time with children who were scared, quiet, or confused. She knew what that felt like. She hadn't forgotten. Sarah taught her to care with kindness, to be patient, and protect someone without smothering them. Amelia used those lessons every day. She often returned to the swing in the garden alone, or with a child she was helping, sitting quietly, just as she used to. It was her way of remembering where she came from. Amelia didn't need fame or attention. She just needed people to be safe, as she finally was. Her calm nature balanced Elliot's energy. Together, they were strong. Together, they weren't a perfect story, but a real one. Nathan had changed more than anyone. He was no longer a man frozen by grief. He still missed his wife, but the pain had softened. In its place was something new, gratitude. He'd learned to be a father again and to be part of something bigger than himself. He didn't work just for business and numbers anymore. His foundation had grown, helping hundreds of children. But more than that, he'd become someone others could rely on. His relationship with Sarah had deepened too. They were partners in every way, at home, in work, in life. Sarah never wanted a title, but to Nathan, she was the core of everything. He often said she was the one who saw what no one else did. When people asked how the family had overcome so much, Nathan answered simply, because one woman cared enough to ask a question no one else did. Amelia sat nearby, leaning against a tree. Sarah and Nathan watched quietly from a distance. Elliot pointed to the swing behind him. "This is where it all started," he said. "I used to sit here when I didn't know how to ask for help. I pointed, hoping someone would notice. One day, someone did, and that's how my life changed." The kids listened in silence. Sometimes, Elliot added, love doesn't need big words. Sometimes, it's just someone seeing you when no one else does. He looked at Sarah and smiled. Then he turned back to the kids. "So, if you see someone sitting alone, don't walk by. Just ask why." The swing moved gently behind him. It wasn't just a seat anymore. It was a reminder, a symbol of how love had quietly saved them. Did you enjoy this emotional story? Then don't miss the upcoming chapters. Subscribe to the channel now to follow inspiring content like this, filled with faith, miracles, and heart-touching twists. Turn on the notification bell to be the first to receive our videos as soon as they're released. Leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. Your opinion means a lot to us. Share this with your friends and family who could use a dose of hope today.